Right, who have we got? Ah, right, it's just, we still have Brian. Oh, I see. So excuse me a moment, I seem to have lost somebody. Hopefully he'll come back. Right. So weight a little bit forwards, hips dropping back, just this sort of sense of the pelvis tucking under, opening up a little bit in the small of your back, because the tucking under will just make that curve a little bit more shallow. And try this idea again of if somewhere around here, it doesn't have to be terribly accurate with this, but somewhere around from the small of the back down to the back of the pelvis. If somebody's just taken hold of your belt or something like that and is pulling you around. So rather than even thinking of sort of like the front of the body moving, and the thing to do with these ideas is not to get stuck on any one of them. So just for a few minutes, try, or a few rounds, try that idea of being pulled around from behind. But then what generally happens is when we focus in that way, is, we're with it for a short while, and then our attention starts to drift. And if you keep pulling your attention back to the same thing, that can get quite frustrating sometimes. It can cause a lot of strain in your attention. So rather than that, when your attention drifts away, bring your attention back and maybe focus on this idea of the spotlight in your navel and so on and so forth. All these things are part of the overall picture of what is happening. And what we're doing when we look at one particular part, one particular element, whether it's the back or the front or whatever, we're just spotlighting that and engaging body and mind around that idea. And what we want to do is to get to a point where all of these things are happening without us having to think about it. So it's like the difference between individual jigsaw pieces and the whole picture. So ultimately, the very particular training that says you focus on this, this, or this is a part of the pathway to getting the whole movement working for you. I don't know who was here on, I think it was on Thursday. I think that was the class I was doing, where I quoted Bruce Lee, who I think himself was paraphrasing a Zen phrase, when he said that if you point your finger at the moon, don't mistake your finger for the moon. Another version of that is that if you see the moon reflected in a puddle, it's not the moon, it's a reflection of the moon. In other words, don't get so caught up in the ideas and the images and the examples and theories of whatever, that you lose sight of the goal of the practice, which can't be summed up in any one way, in my experience anyway. And then just raise your arms. Ask yourself, if you bring your attention back to here, ask yourself if that can actually work there, or do you need to sort of shift the focus of your attention up a bit? It's not a right or wrong answer to this, I think. And this, let your hands drop. Rocking forwards and backwards, and your arms following, so swaying in the river, hips dropping back. And when you drop back, again, just try and focus on that lower part of the spine. Imagine yourself being pulled back. And then a sort of push now, almost like in the process of coming back, you just rested the back of your pelvis, lower part of your spine against the wall. And then when you go to come forwards, there's a little kind of push as you push yourself forwards. But there's no wall there. So if you do this, it's just nothing's going to happen. So somehow that movement backwards has to go down into the ground. Remember that we've already discovered, as it were, that when the rib cage closes inwards, our arms tend to come forwards and the back opens, upper back, and then when the upper back closes, the opposite. So as we go forward, this sort of thing is going on. Again, as always, that's exaggerated. And then going in, and then it's this and this. So it's like, I suppose, going back to the jigsaw puzzle analogy, when we start off, and you know, this is very much for people with your sort of background and experience in these arts. This is not necessarily something I would offer to beginners, but it's like you lay out the pieces. So you're thinking, oh, there's that connection, and they're all in front of you. And this is a nice little exercise for arranging some of those pieces, dusting them off, as it were. But gradually, even with this exercise, you want to not forget about the detail, but just draw back from it a little bit so that you develop this overview of your body in movement, your body swaying in the river. And you develop an intent. Your intent is to go forwards and then backwards, and not to sort of like stumble or tense up or stiffen up. And then this time, as you come forward, letting your weight settle, sink your hips back a little bit more and pushing up. So that area of the lower back, the small of the back, can be quite a significant area, because when we move from the legs, as we do, of course, it's there that we first feel the movement, the energy coming into the upper body. And of course, it corresponds to this area of the lower dantian. In the middle of the small of the back, well, almost in the middle of the small of the back, there's an acupuncture point called Ming Men, the gate of life. And it corresponds to one idea about the lower dantian, which is a very precise point behind and below the navel. It's also a point that is important for the energy flow in the body generally. And very specifically is used in acupressure for acupuncture and acupressure for lower back problems to relieve tightness in the lower part of the back. So bringing your attention to those to that area can have quite a significant effect. Change into the wild goose. And parting the clouds. Keeping your hand in front of you, because if there's a time when we're likely to get that sort of sense of pulling back and straining in the back, it's when the arms go above the body. One idea that I've come across is that we kind of aim to lean forward slightly because mostly we lean back. So leaning forward slightly brings us to this. Obviously, there's a great deal of variation there, of course. But your hands remain in front of the body. It's quite rare for the hands to go behind. One more time. And then dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So you've done this enough to really be able to make the switch, particularly in the early exercises, without too much thinking, going from one movement to another in a familiar pattern, a familiar routine. And this is where that aspect of what we might think of as memory or recall, familiarity with the routine. I don't mean memory in terms of being able to recall lots of detail or lots of facts. The kind of way that we employ memory when we're walking down the street going to somebody's house. You know, I'm sure we've all done it. We've walked down the road with a friend and they don't know the place, but you do. And you actually have to stop and think and tell them, oh, I'm sort of turning off here or something like that, because they don't know it that well. But it's like your feet are doing the directing for you. You just do it quite intuitively. One more time on each side. And then pushing in 4 directions. make sure that you've maintained within your body, within your posture, that feeling of spaciousness, of a freedom to move. Moving to fill that space rather than strain against it. So after this one, changing. And then add in the turn if it's comfortable for you. And then switch to the other side. Remember that one of the things that we're trying to do is to always adjust how we're thinking, how we're approaching an exercise, which is where the kind of ideas that I started off today with, like moving from the tail of your spine and so on, become important. You think of the same thing here. And it's always interesting, I think, how much effect a change of view can actually have. And this development of the mind-body relationship and the degree of influence that they have on each other is a significant element in the progression of HQ. And now, sinking down and pushing up. How this is level. I'll show you once again with the stick. So if I can arrange this. Yeah, you see the sticks, it's like I'm kind of going up and down the stick like this. Obviously it's going back a little bit, but now when I go down, I tilt forwards and I imagine you can see the end of the stick behind me is going out a long way, like a kangaroo's tail. And then it's like somebody pushes down on that and brings me back up. Now, obviously, that is not what is going on. Your spine doesn't extend that far or whatever, but your intent can. And so that's the kind of image that we have, and it will help you create a space for that action to take place within your body. I think you probably all heard me talk about the young woman who described watching Tai Chi as watching a couple of us shape the air around us. So we're shaping the air to create a space for the hips, the lower part of the spine to go back. Until that space is there, then having them go back is always going to be a struggle. And then rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. And the use of the mind in this way creates a very gentle quality to the movement. Not forcing the body physically into anything, but rather creating the environment for those movements to be cultivated. One more time. And then in the upright position, polishing the table. One more on each side. And shake out. So remember, this isn't mind over matter. This is releasing the potential of what we think of as mind and what we think of as matter to work together. You're not trying to dominate the body, and you're certainly not trying to force your body into doing something just by thinking it. That's a different kind of quality, a different kind of concept, and it can pit body against mind, mind against body. You know, you can get to a point where you're denying that you're in pain, for instance, simply by blotting it out with mental technique, and forcing the body to carry on doing something that is causing it pain. That is not what we would look to do in Tai Chi, and it's important. It's an important distinction to make, because it can be raised. Oh, I'm thinking this, therefore I should be able to do it. So if we use an image, if we use an idea, a memory, or whatever, to extend that idea of space within the body to the space around us, and you know, in very crude terms, if I can create a space for in my mind, an image of a space for my hips to go backwards, my hips have somewhere to go. If I'm trying to force my hips backwards against their best interests, then I'm creating a disharmony. So it's important to remember that, and not to get caught up in, I must be able to do this, I must force myself to do it. A couple of weeks ago in the Olympics, it was interesting reading some of the stuff that came out, particularly from the gymnasts. Who, you know, there was the high-profile woman who who withdrew for her mental health, which was I thought incredible but that provoked a whole discussion. These people drive themselves to a point where they lose any sense of where they are in the room and on the planet. That's what happens when mind tries to overrule the body. Always, the body will eventually rebel against that. So this is a very different approach. Hands in front of your shoulders, and just over. So that idea of moving like water eroding, water wearing away the cliff, isn't just a physical thing. It also should be reflected in our approach with the mind element as well. Beginning to turn so your weight moves. And again, you can feel the push up through your lower back into the middle and the upper back and the shoulders as you move from one foot to another. From the side, your elbows going just far enough. So if I do this, I get to here. I'm not doing this because that pulls me forwards. I'm not saying there isn't a place for that. It's just that generally, it's not how we approach things in Tai Chi. Other exercise forms do that, and there's good reasons sometimes for doing that. Sometimes it's good to set a goal and to see if you can achieve it, but you don't want to go too far down that route. So now going into bear play. I'm going to change to hitting the ball in front of the shoulder, and down, get to here. And instead of going back the other way, turn out and feel how that sort of winds down into your leg a little bit, and then releasing. One more on each side. Now, bring your weight to the middle, straighten up your feet a little bit, and just turn in side to side. And again, bring your attention to the lower part of your back and circling around. Don't make this too big a movement, and see if you can keep the connection between your hands and fingers and that lower part of your back. It's like, rather than thinking, right, my hands are going to go over here, then up and down, think, if I exaggerate, I get to here, and it's like I'm doing this. See the movement here. But again, it shouldn't be noticeable, but you want to try and feel it. Go back the other way. And again, give your legs a shake. This is stretching between heaven and earth. And this is an exercise that is often connected to stomach and spleen. But when we do this, it's actually this whole area of the body between sort of hips and waist, that or ribs and that kind of area extends out and contracts, which we want to try and feel that with all of the movements, because it is the center of all the movement. But it can be clearer, I think, with a movement like stretching between heaven and earth. So start off very simply and build it up to whatever point is appropriate to you. You know, okay, stand on one leg and so on and so forth. But bear in mind that awareness of what's happening here in the belly and the lower part of your back may well be better if you keep to a very basic movement. So turn the hands outwards, push up. And then back. So I'm going to do one more, and then after this one, I'm going to start to transfer my weight as well. You transfer into the leg opposite the hand that's rising. I'm going into this leg now. Take a slightly wider stance. Avoid tilting over. Slightly down in the middle. In wider stance, it's sometimes easier to get that sense of your pelvis dropping between your legs. Put in raising. One more time. Okay. Shake it. And then something much more minimalist, hands at your sides and your mind, this image of the round pillars. So your elbows out slightly, fingers hanging down and just rotating. So if I come a bit closer, you hear my middle finger is sort of on the line between my hip and my ankle, and then it's like if I let my little finger touch the side of my leg, it's like I'm doing this, and then I come back, and then I let my thumb touch the side of my leg, and I'm doing that and that. Except that my hands are a bit further out than that. Okay, and then shake it. Now, 1 foot forwards. Transferring your weight. Again, there are different ways that we can focus on this exercise. You can think of that push down, your foot pushing against the ground to push you forwards. You can think of it rather than the push as a release, that the leg gets compressed like a spring and it bounces you forwards. We could also, earlier I was saying, focus on that area of the lower back where the spine meets the pelvis, and then so imagine being pulled back and then pulled forwards and so on. Raising your toes and your heel, which will give your body a little bit of a turn, more, not as much as that. And now you can allow for that feeling of a rotation. You're still pretty much keeping straight on, but I'll show you from the side. Because my front foot is turned out, get my hand out the way, so there. When I get to here, there'll be a sort of pull in that direction. I may not actually move in that direction because it's only a very slight pull, but nevertheless, the pull is there. And likewise, when I come back, the pull is towards the toes. So the potential for the energy, the potential for the turn is actually very much there. And because I've got a movement, a very subtle energy this way, that can help me to both raise the heel and bring the foot in. And of course, going this way. So remember, a movement doesn't have to be seen to be felt. In Chinese medicine, when they talk about the qi, it's often presented not so much as a this is a thing and we can define this, but rather in its functions. So they say the qi protects, it holds, it nourishes. In some of the old Chinese classics, they'll talk about you can't see the wind, but you can see the result of the wind, if you see what I mean. So a lot of these very subtle movements, if we're thinking of them as this integration of body, mind, and movement, body, mind, and energy, then you wouldn't necessarily expect to see them, but with a kind of attuned awareness, shall we say, you can begin to feel them. So, on the other side. And then turning out, and toes lifting. And then stepping in. and step in. And in the other direction. Put your right foot forwards. So bird folds its wings. This time change to fisherman cast the net. And pushing the wave. Good. Now sit back and stir in the beans. Good. Check out. So left foot forwards. Sink your weight back. And chest close as you push forwards. And I keep talking about this one, the chest and upper back, but more and more feeling it all the way down through the spine and through the front of the body. These connections, processes gradually reveal themselves. And then casting the net. And pushing away. And so. Good. Okay. Shake out. Rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Rolled up. The other side. Your back. Round your hips. Light on your belly. Up past your chest. So when we bring the weight forward, once again, it's this part that we feel is sort of being pulled down. I sometimes say to people in the chair-based exercises that what you imagine, I'll just show you very quickly, is that there's somebody sitting behind you there and they fed their hand up through the back of the chair and grabbed hold of your belt. So that there's this constant kind of sense of being pulled back and down into the chair. When we stand, we're said to be sitting in the same way. So it's like I'm here and somebody behind me is just kind of tugged here. Goes, it's kind of like that. So that's another way that we can look at the posture in general and this exercise as well. Embrace tiger, return to mountain. The sinking down and pushing up. One more round. And stand. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, cheers, Mike.